And
Welcome back to the Let's Pivot podcast, the show for founders, leaders, and executive coaches who want clarity, confidence, and repeatable growth. This is our Leadership Unlocked series, where we explore the mindset and decisions behind sustainable leadership in a rapidly changing landscape. Today's guest is Dr. Elaine Yarbrough, a renowned consultant and author who has spent nearly 4 decades helping leaders and organizations navigate conflict, build healthy cultures, and unlock their full potential around the world. Hi, Elaine. Thanks for joining us today.
thank you.
We would like to start by getting to know a little bit about you. So, looking back at your career, what pivotal moment shaped your trajectory, and how does that connect to the broader history of leadership research and its real world impact on leaders today?
Good. Well, the most pivotal point for me was graduate school. I had been in communication, human relations in undergraduate school, in debate, all those things that one does. And I wanted to study interpersonal communication and organizational behavior development. And a professor in my undergraduate school, he told me that there were 2 places to study. That was Michigan and Kansas. And so I chose Kansas, and it was a life-changing decision. I got my master's and PhD there, and the faculty were talking about mentorship and leadership. They were just fabulous. I never had that kind of support before. When you get a PhD, you're supposed to want to profess. So the first thing I did was go to the University of Colorado to be on faculty there. I loved the teaching, but I got a very different view of what bad leadership was. So I left there in 1982 and started my business, which I've had ever since. So that pivotal point was not only studying the topic and being mentored and being included in consulting projects by the faculty. And so by the time I left graduate school, I already knew how to intervene in large systems. I didn't even know I was putting together who is a good leader, who's not, why do things work, why do they not. And so I was very, very glad that I had that opportunity. And it was okay to have a stint of teaching and see really bad leadership. And then when I got out, then of course I could experience wonderful leadership in the consulting places and also bad. And that's why they needed somebody. So that was pivotal. And I hope people in my consultation learned as much as I've learned, because my opportunity to learn about systems and leadership in working in 36 countries has just been life enriching.
That's awesome. And when you work with amongst those, such a high number of different countries, I'm sure you experience even more, more conflict and just different problems than you would experience if you're strictly
Yeah.
working within the US.
Actually, the problems tend to be similar.
The same.
The way they're dealt with, I mean, we're humans, and of course there are cultural pieces. The way they're dealt with tends to differ. And so some of what I learned is if you're in this kind of culture, this works. If you're in a different kind of culture, something else works. So, I mean, just creative how people deal with issues. So I feel very blessed.
Well, that's awesome. Actually, I want to just ask, could you tell us a little bit about what your organization does specifically to help? Because it sounds like you saw a lot of issues within the faculty working in an industry, and you saw a need and you went to go correct it,
Mhm.
which is awesome. Not
Mhm.
everyone will step in like that. Could you just tell us a little bit about how your firm helps organizations?
Well, we deal from the individual level all up to the systems level. So it may be that a person needs coaching, and sometimes that's the legitimate diagnosis, and sometimes the organization has them as the identified patient. If we can fix Sarah or Bill, we'll be fine. But I have to say that 80% of the time, it's not Sarah or Bill, it's the team, and they keep rotating the identified patient, if you understand those words. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
they're the problem, get rid of them or fix them, and we'll be fine. But I said, "Oh, how many times have you done this?" Well, yeah, well, 10, yeah, I think maybe 10 times. I said, "Well, I'm not sure it's the person." So, we see the person in context in the team. So then we work with teams. Sometimes it's the leadership of the team, sometimes it's the interaction. Worked a lot with the top leaders because, as we all know, that if the top leaders don't understand or buy into things, it's very hard to pull off in an organization. And then we worked a lot at the big level, which is mergers and acquisitions. Only 15% of mergers work because people look at they do due diligence on the finances, but not on the cultures. And so they don't understand how the two cultures, especially big and little, clash. And so our work was with the leaders of those projects and the higher ups. How are we going to blend those cultures? And what are we going to say we're going to keep doing, stop doing? And what are we going to learn from the smaller guys that we just acquired? That's hard work. That's very hard. And when people change business models, it happens a lot in technological world. Something will be outdated, so they have to change business models. And so helping people adjust to that around leadership and culture. So all of those things, and then that in a global context. So a lot of our work internationally have been with teams that the members of which could be from 7 or 8 different countries. So, we're working with language differences, cultural differences, and cultural differences. So it's all of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Does
Yeah,
that make
that's
sense?
really interesting. And I never really thought about I mean, I've worked in tech, so I've seen the acquisitions, and there's always so much tension, especially
Oh,
like you said, with the culture of the smaller, especially in tech, right? The smaller tech companies, they have like their own vibe. And it's kind of a culture shock for them coming into a large organization. Yeah. So
yeah,
that's really cool.
yeah. And it's
Given,
also,
oh,
let me say one more thing. It's
yeah.
also true within um, entrepreneurial companies that are growing. There's a whole transition model of what they go through, and some of them make it and some of them don't. Some the people make it, some of them don't, because they like that informal. I know everybody's on toilet paper or whatever, but they don't have meetings. They cross in the hall, and then when they move to what's called professionalism, that's a big jump. And so we worked a lot with transitions in those kind of companies.
Okay. That's awesome. So helping smaller businesses through the
Yeah,
growing pains.
yeah,
Yeah.
well said.
Scaling. Well, given everything that's emerged within the field, what would you say are the real world needs that you're seeing leaders struggling with today?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm going to put this in a historical context because what we used to think were the good questions about leadership to look at, research, notice, some people are still operating on, and it's really outdated. So this is a 60-year quick overview. For a long time, the question was, what are the traits of good leaders? And so it was an individual focus. And then the question was, can they be learned or are leaders born? Well, that went back and forth for a long time. Then the research said, that can be learned. And then the question came up, which I think is an important one. Does leadership even matter?
Mm, yeah.
Everybody said yes, leadership matters. So companies kept looking for leaders with traits, and they couldn't figure out why some of them were succeeded and some of them didn't. So fundamentally, it was the wrong question. And of course, for non-dominant groups, the traits were always listed as what we think of as white male traits. So if somebody had, these traits, somebody else had these, and these were closer to what our images were of a good leader, that's why we got such homogeneity in leaders for so long to the dominant culture. So then that kind of loosened up a bit, but we understand people still think that way. It's like, is this person a leader? Well, they might learn to be a leader. I mean, it's a very different phrase. And then we hit this whole point about 20 years ago of transformational leaders. That was the whole thing. And how do leaders not only do good business, but how do they transform the culture? You could tell I don't work. Um, it was just grandiose. It's like, how do we make the highest potential? I mean, it's great questions, but it's kind of a dumb frame. More on vision, strategy. Finally, leaders were called to, the culture might matter. And so that was the transformational piece. But nobody really learned how to do that, many, because it takes a highly self aware, transformed person to lead that. And so self awareness had not come into the fore quite yet. It's funny to say this now because it's just so obvious to me, but it's still news to some people that in the research they decided and consultants too. Context matters. Oh my goodness. So when you think, I'm sorry to be so flippant here. Um, when you think about people like Churchill, he was really disliked, thought of as not a leader, just a troublemaker. And then here comes World War II. Context matters. So he was brilliant. And then after the war, then he was voted out. And so, of course, everybody was surprised about that except the English. But, his qualities didn't fit the new context. So context matters. And if you think about COVID, Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, who had one of the best records of protecting people during COVID. Also, by the way, the 5 countries that did the best during COVID were all led by women. And what made them different is they actually listened to the research. They actually took early action on masking and spatial segregation. They went straight to families, the mothers and kids, and held special different gatherings with them to talk about how they could protect themselves. So they brought the whole feminine perspective. And so it was international women leaders and states with women governors all did the best in terms of who died and who didn't during COVID. So all of a sudden, here it emerges that context really matters and different qualities matter. Now, because we're still stuck in the white male model of leadership, all this research got seen as lucky. Those people were lucky. And you'll hear that said all the time. When a person who's not seen as a leader highly succeeds, well, they were lucky. And when a person in the dominant group succeeds, it's like because they have the qualities of leadership. So, because of our frame from that old leadership model, it's been hard for people to integrate what's actually needed in the world and to look at those who are really successful but are not seen automatically as leaders. It's just amazing how we reframe that.
And it sounds like, I mean, a lot of those examples you were providing were recent. I mean, COVID
Oh, yeah.
2020, so five,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So it's like, so it's still something that you're seeing as
Oh, yeah. Oh,
prevalent within the field.
yeah. One more thing during that 20-year period is there were studies that got connected that leadership improves when it's shared with the team. So we're here now, we're getting away from looking at the individual and what he or she can produce as outcomes to how a leader interacts with those folks that they shared leadership with. And of course, that's a lot of our work is like, okay, you're called boss, but really what's coming to the fore now is we need leadership at all levels within the team, between functions, the operator on the line. Of course, I found that out of the quality movement. So it's not just looking at the top leader, but that's kind of one of those hidden things. And since it fights so much with our individual model, kind of gets buried. Now, the last 10 years has been really important. A whole body of research and practice on the power of inclusivity. Now, of course, we know in our political environment, that's a bad word. But the first step in building a strong team is are people included in ways that they can produce? Inclusion is a very powerful human need. And just think about it. If you don't feel like you're seen, nobody understands your talent, you're constantly interrupted. When you say something, it's ignored. You're not going to get that person's talent. And of course, that overlaps with the whole issue of safety, psychological safety. So, those two things, safety and inclusivity, as the absolutely critical stage of team development and healthy culture. So, that has actually been studied. And of course, it always is. The people feel included, they do better.
Yeah.
Authentic leadership came in. There are a lot of ways to look at that, but the way we look at it is quit imitating other people, whether it's men, women to ethnic groups to whites, or just you because you're not confident. What are your core skills that you can learn other things? You can learn budget, do da. But what are your really powerful skills to bring that nobody else has? I mean, somebody else might have part of it, but your combination in the right context is very powerful. I grew up in Texas, and our family, I mean, we're high risk takers. We'll do anything, and humor is big. And because of how I grew up and I'm a short woman, I could get by with many things because I'm just outrageous. And so people could hear the truth because I combine that compassion with authenticity. And so it's don't be don't be like somebody else, be yourself. I just heard a Sylvia Plath quote last night. It's like, how about being yourself rather than somebody else or nobody at all? Well, yeah, that about gets it. So often we teach a course in authentic leadership. Now, here is the big transformative leap. The companies that do the best over time and the leaders that are most effective over time are ones that understand interdependence. It's not A doing something to get Y. It's how we are interdependent and we move in this cycle. Now, we're taught from the time we go to school either or thinking. It's either that one or that one. In fact, I just heard a podcast the other day talking about, oh no, it was a review of a new series called Pluribus. I think that's what it was. And the interviewee, the woman who stars on it, was saying it brings up all the questions about, do you focus on yourself or other? And I thought that's the wrong question. How do we focus on self and other? If if you don't do both, all of it fails. So may I show you share a screen to show you what I'm
Yes.
talking about. So this is a model that I've developed and used for the last 15 years, and it will show you um, the. So let me back up. So in each phase of a high performing team, sustainable, you will have different steps, like you see, good fit, which that's the inclusion piece. Do you let people fit in? Do they have the right roles? Is there mutual trust? Full engagement, planning, execution, results, and renewal. So teams have to go through this over and over again, especially if they have new assignments or if they have new people. Anytime you get a new person, you got to go back. It's just faster if the leader knows how to do that. In the middle of inspired leadership, it's directive and participative. You have to tell people what's up and also let them participate, which is also could be seen as masculine and feminine. So, what are these little loops? They're called polarities, and polarities are interdependent values that you have to have both for a greater purpose. So, take breathing. You have to inhale and exhale to live. Now, it makes no sense to argue which is better, inhaling or exhaling. And that's what a lot of the conflicts sound like that I mediate. I'm going, you're going to die. That's the literal polarity. Activity and rest is another one. We're so action oriented in this culture, and we really kind of are afraid of rest. And so people get exhausted, they burn out, and the resting might be, binge watch Netflix, but then they're not renewed. So a lot of my work with both individuals and especially leaders who have so much to do is how can you rest? And by the way, it's really okay to rest. So activity and rest go together. So those are basic ones like stability and change. I've worked with so many organizations, they're into change. And a huge international organization I work with, it's been successful for decades. They missed one market window. And so they got a new CEO, and all the person wanted to do is change, 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 change. Well, who resisted change? The ones that wanted some stability and some reflection of their great culture that they had developed. And so literally the leader blew out the culture and missed other opportunities. So there was no sense of how do we stabilize ourselves with our history, with our current culture as we make these big leaps? So leaders that can't see them together always make the same mistakes. So in the team model, I'm just going to use this as an example. It could be almost any polarity, but when we're working on inclusion or fit, you see both the individual and the team. If you focus too much on the individual, you just get people running in all directions. If you focus too much on the team and the whole, you get groupthink. We can see the downsides really quickly. So the question is, number one, can you see that they fit together? And number two, what are the actions and directives that help us get the best of both? So We get individual autonomy and we get team coordination. Right roles, clear. Got to have clear roles. But we know in this chaotic, my dog's barking, in this chaotic mess that we're in the world, if you don't have flexibility built in, people will just, they'll say, this is my job. I didn't do it because I'm clear on my role. And so the leader has to say, okay, what are the processes that help us be flexible so that when chaos reigns and a whole priority shifts, how do we move with that so that you don't have to get stuck in that? Mutual trust. How can we be candid so that we know what the heck's going on, but diplomatic so that people can save face, they don't feel, humiliated. So we have to have candor and diplomacy in full engagement, dedicated to the job, but I have boundaries. This is a big one. Many organizations that I've worked with, they say, okay, for a good culture, we need full engagement. And they do a whole uh, program called full engagement. Well, they spend millions of dollars. It never works because they've missed fit, roles, and trust. And what they mean by full engagement is no boundaries. 24/7, and everybody goes, no. And then they start figuring out ways to get boundaries. So where are our boundaries so that we can be dedicated and still be alive? With planning, both strategic and tactical. Some people are really good at tactics. Some people are better at strategies, but you got to have both. We got to have planned execution and emergent. Same thing as cleared flexible. You see how they're across from each other because we know new realities are going to come in. And then results, we both do basics and innovation. Now, all consumers know when something happens to their computer and they call up, headquarters or the service people, they can't get help because the company so loves innovation that they let the basics go. That is a formula for going out of business. Now, the healthy renewal is what most people don't plan in at all. They just think burnout is a great idea. Things like are said like, well, he came back to work after 2 days of heart surgery. Well, I think that's stupid. And we just glorify it. Some football player, I don't know football very well, but he had testicular cancer. He had surgery 3 weeks ago. Now he's playing football. I'm going, I don't think that's bright. So healthy renewal, that we're active. That is our culture. And then we have rest. And how do we rest as a team? And how do we rest as individuals? So as a leader sees all of these pieces. And by the way, this is not just a team. This could be the whole system that you're looking at if you're fighting. And so a leader needs to know those phases. They need to have skills and share leadership to get through the phases. And they need the both masculine and feminine qualities of being directive. Here's our mission. Here are our deadlines. And participative, or what we call it, the research brings up as empowering. And we've heard that word for a while. But how do we legitimately turn over leadership to people in the team, the organization, who do things better than us? Good leaders are aware of their blind spots and their weaknesses, and they turn it over to other people and collaborate. So in the last 10 years, it's been inclusivity, authenticity, but the big one is interdependence, that we're all in this together. We all have things that we can contribute. And the higher up you get in leadership, you lose the granularity when you're sitting at the top. It just tickles when I ask the top leader, well, how is that new program going? Oh, great. People love it. 3 layers down. I have no idea what's going on. And so there's not a flow up communication as well as down. And the higher the more you lose the granularity. So that's how to think in polarities. And then there's a lot to learn about that. But the first step, unless I'm teaching a course to do polarity thinking, the first step is just when somebody says, is it this or this? Think to yourself as a leader, either centralize or decentralize. And every 5 years they decide the opposite and waste time. The question is, what in our system needs to be centralized, for profit, for effectiveness, and what needs to be decentralized, like certain norms in operational sites. So once you just understand both end thinking, then you get a plan, a strategic plan that really sticks. So polarity thinking is the basis for operationalizing interdependence and having sustainable change, not just this boom, boom, boom pendulum swing. Boy, that was a good idea. It cost us $5 billion, but it did work. So I think of all the things I could say in the current milieu with leadership is leaders that understand both end thinking, have the attitude, the perspective, and the skills to use polarities.
It's awesome. I really love this model. And I think what you were talking about with, with burnout and stuff, I feel like it's difficult sometimes for people within organizations because they see the senior level leaders who are like, oh, they're working on PTO, they're responding,
Yes. Yes.
out of 24 hours during the
Yeah,
day. And they're like, well, that's what they did and look at where they are. So that's what I need to do. And it just sort of trickles down.
it
People
does.
don't feel like they can step away and still have the results in the career that they want. I think when
Well,
you
and
can
that,
help leaders to model that for the employees, it's super
yeah.
helpful.
One of my favorite leaders I worked with, he took over from, a workaholic. And he said it at the beginning, he said, I want everybody out of here at 5. People
Yeah.
went, oh, yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah.
And he walked through, it was a big innovation site for an international corporation. He walked through every day at 5 and said, why are you still here? And, then people understood he's leaving. I'm going to get in trouble if I don't leave. And so
Hmm.
he shifted the culture. Now, but we all know that when certain things come up in our lives, whether it's personal or professional, you got to get in there and work 20 hours a day. But that should not be the norm. That should be the exception.
But given everything going on in the current landscape, where do they need to shift their focus? Like, what do you feel like they should move away from and move more deeply into?
So stop the trait perspective and looking at styles and outcomes. That's and they need to move to everyday leadership and followership. Leadership followership is another polarity. So what kind of followers do we need? And so historically in team dynamics, that was called an ideal group member. So they become part of a leader in a team, but they fill in a certain trait like I was working with a team recently, and this one woman was particularly good at saying, wait a minute, let me summarize what's on the table here and where we want to go next. Well, that was a critical piece, critical skill for efficiency and inclusion. So looking at the whole and looking at skills that everybody has and looking at yourself in context. Stop this hero model. The hero model simply doesn't work. And we like heroes so much, we call everybody a hero who does something special. But let's share the hero stuff. Stop looking at the leader in isolation and look at the leader in context, the supporting systems, collective leadership. So the question then would be for an organization that's growing, downsizing, doesn't matter, is like, how does this system, our policies, procedures, uh, conflict management, all the pieces of a system, how does this support different kinds of leaders? And so that you allow more leadership into the system. We tend to look at the person, not the system. We're an individualistic culture. So looking at what supports people being successful. This one keeps coming up in the current leadership. Stop looking at the white male model and look at qualities of non-dominant groups. They said this, but non-dominant group, meaning women, that's one non-dominant group. And who was successful during COVID? The women leaders, because they knew both directive, we're going to wear masks, we're going to, keep apart from each other, and we're going to be empathic. We're going to talk to mothers, to children, to fathers, and help them. So that combination of masculine and feminine from the non-dominant group was powerful. And you'll hear people like Jacinda Ahern, in fact, she's teaching now after she stepped down from prime minister, to say empathy and good leadership are not opposites. She doesn't say polarity, but that's what it is. I can be directive, I can say what's needed, and I can be empathic and compassionate. So she's really taking a lead on that and actually teach. Is she at Harvard? One of the Ivy Leagues. A lot of research around men and women show that some characteristics both do well. Good leaders do well. But the ones that women tend to shine on is collaboration, making sure there's agreement before moving forward, empowerment, and empathy. And those are the qualities that seem to be needed more now. And of course, if you look, at the big picture, you'll see, well, it's not a secret, you'll see the swing to no, leaders are heroes. And we don't want any of that female stuff. Boys need to be boys. All the stuff, social identity to how we deal with the military. I mean, what the research shows, and I say research, but I mean feedback to researchers from practitioners as well. And the Institute for Leadership Association, they try to combine those. They want practitioners to say, what should we be studying? And sure enough, I mean, every leader that I've worked with that can lead sustainable change for effective organizations for a lot of different kinds of people. They are clear about what needs to be directed. They talk to people. They listen. They care when people are what, distraught, burnt out, and go, what's going on with us? We got to change the system. I mean, they're really smart and they're also really compassionate. And I just have had the privilege of just working with some incredible people. Now, having said that, I also have experience of working with not so incredible people.
Seen both ends of the spectrum.
Hopefully,
I feel like everyone at some point gets the opportunity to work for both, right? And once you have that amazing leader and you go to someone who is not as much, you're like, you kind of value even more that previous person that you had
and
partnered with.
that leader teaches you what you can teach somebody else. So
Yeah,
that's what I say.
definitely.
I feel like my whole consultancy has been interdependent. I teach them, they teach me, and especially cross
Yeah.
cultural. My team and I, we would say, okay, this is not surprising. We're Americans. We have a frame of reference. We have a bigger frame of reference than most because we worked in many cultures.
Yeah.
However, we want to learn from you what works, and we will suggest things to you. And we all have frames of reference, so big deal. So let's just go for it. And I make, terrible mistakes too, but that's okay.
Well, I mean, we're human, like you said. Everyone does. Well, thanks so much, Elaine. I really appreciate you joining me today.